we've been making the case that if we want to strike a deal with the Americans, keeping China out has to be priority number one.
Poilievre is receiving praise. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we have the president of the automotive industry saying that Pierre Poilievre is bang on with his new plan for handling Donald Trump, China, his vision for Canada. And speaking of Donald Trump, we have WW3 here on the brink. Ships and planes are being moved into position. Iran is not negotiating. This may turn bad very quickly. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off from the National Post, New Brunswick sits on an ocean of natural gas and now it's importing it from Australia. This is so embarrassing, this story. They could be producing this themselves. They could be importing it from Alberta, but instead, what are they doing? Importing it from Australia. We've also got this one from Canada Proud. A federal court has restored the refugee status of an unnamed Pakistani man who fled the country to Canada, only to travel back to Pakistan 6 times since. Yeah, that's not a refugee. Moving ahead, we've got a man facing 14 charges after 3 kidnappings in 4 days in Metro Vancouver. Welcome to Canada. We're getting some major updates here coming from Iran. We've got this one here. The Al Adidi Air Base in Qatar has been completely evacuated, so it is empty now. It's go time over in Iran. If Trump's going to make the move, it's going to be probably in the next 24 hours. We're seeing that they're bringing all the different ships and planes into position.
See all the green dots on the map? These are long-term U.S. military bases operating near Iran. You've got several here in the area of Kuwait. You got the Al-Udeid Air Base, which is the largest in the entire region. That's in Qatar right here, some around the area of Oman. Heck, you can stretch back to western and southern Turkey as well and find them. All the white dots are the other bases that the U.S. has a military presence in. And you could see it here, right? In Qatar, eastern Saudi Arabia, up here in northern Iraq. So, I mean, the plate is well set now in terms of bases. Now let's talk about the naval buildup, and this has been quite the armada. Earlier today, we got word that the USS Gerald Ford had moved off the coast of Israel, and then the Roosevelt now is near Crete, the island of Crete in Greece. The Canberra and the Michael Murphy are now in the Persian Gulf. All right, they are positioned, as well as the Santa Barbara and the Mitch are now there in the Gulf of Oman. The president talked about having an armada, and that's what's been assembled here now. Nearly surrounding Iran, well to the west and to the south, with Iran perhaps in its sights sometime soon.
So before they get into the next segment, the USS Gerald Ford is the most advanced, the biggest warship ever created. This was contracted in 2017. It's a nuclear aircraft carrier. It can be out at sea for a very long time, and it has very advanced defense missile systems. So the reason why it's positioned over by Israel here, the area you'd expect that Iran would be sending their pow-pows over to, is because the USS Gerald Ford has the missile systems to defend Israel. Meanwhile, they have all these other ones here. They'll be protecting the Abraham Lincoln, but I mean, there'll be a lot of assault that comes from the ocean on the south here to bombard Iran. Not to mention they've moved planes all around here. I can only imagine they spent months working out a plan how to attack Iran.
Good morning to you, Bill. The U.S. Embassy in Israel now says that all non-essential staff, as well as their families, should leave the country if they are able to, if they want to, and it should happen today, Bill. This comes as tension between Washington and Tehran is now ratcheting up by the day. The vice president is going to welcome Oman's foreign minister to the White House shortly to further discuss Iran. This comes after Vance told the Washington Post overnight the Trump team has no intention of engaging in a prolonged war with Iran. The U.S. wrapped third round of nuclear negotiations yesterday in Geneva, a neutral territory. They spoke for many hours and were mediated by officials from Oman. Iran's foreign ministry says this. Take a listen.
Conflicting statements made by some American officials will continue to cast doubts and questions.
As we see here, they're negotiating, but Trump has given his final warning before they're going to send over the pow-pows, telling people to get out of there today because this might go sour very quickly.
The talks are only focused on nuclear weapons, but the Secretary of State says that's just for right now.
Eventually, we'll have to have conversations about more than just the nuclear program.
Also on the U.S. agenda, Iran's ballistic missile program, its human rights abuses, and support for terrorists. As you mentioned, right now the Pentagon's deployed over a dozen warships and thousands of sailors to the region. 7 days ago now, at the inaugural Gaza Board of Peace meeting, President Trump started the clock.
Now we may have to take it a step further, or we may not.
Yeah, it's getting there. We've got footage here from the tarmac at Tel Aviv in Israel. This is just a passenger plane, but there's a whole bunch of American refueling planes here. Basically taking up most of the airport. We've also got Trump taking questions.
For Iran, is there a risk that strike could turn into a long, drawn-out conflict in the Middle East?
I guess you could say there's always a risk. You know, when there's war, there's a risk in anything, both good and bad. We've had tremendous luck with myself, Soleimani, al-Baghdadi. Everything's worked out, and then we do the Midnight Hammer and so many others. Everything's worked out, and we want to keep it that way, but we're going to see. Look, it'd be wonderful if they'd negotiate really in good conscience, good faith and conscience, but they are not getting there. So far, Peter, they're not getting it.
Has your team told you that if you use the military now, that there will be regime change right away?
No, nobody's told me that.
Yeah, so it seems like Iran doesn't want to negotiate. This isn't going well. And you'll notice too here at the bottom it says Trump could have friendly takeover of Cuba. So I'm guessing there was another part of this segment where they talked about that. I'd like to see a deal with Iran. Time is running out. Iran better not screw around now. With all that said, we've got 700 aircraft right now surrounding Iran, 100 5th-gen stealth fighters, 100 refueling tankers, 20 AWACS, 18 electronic warfare jets, 2 carrier strike groups. The tankers have already moved from Qatar to Tel Aviv. Something is happening soon, and we know that because we've got breaking China urges citizens to leave Iran quickly. We've also got Italy urging their citizens to leave. And as you saw in the news, America isn't urging citizens to leave. Something is about to happen here very soon. Pierre Poilievre's speech is making waves. In a second here, we're going to take a look at Brian Kingston, president of the automotive industry. But first, let's take a look at Pierre Poilievre's plan. He's got 4 pillars. First, abundant low-cost energy. Eliminate all carbon taxes, permit rapid oil and gas and electricity projects, cancel EV rebates, and take sales tax off made-in-Canada vehicles. Number 2, unblock resources and home building. Grant 6-month approval times, adopt a one project, one approval rule, establish strategic energy and mineral reserve, repeal anti-development laws, rapid permit a new pipeline to the Pacific. Third pillar is a strong military, new bases in Iqaluit, Churchill, and Inuvik, 4 new icebreakers rather than 2, accelerate procurement of submarines, tactical helicopters, satellite ground stations, and over-the-top radar, rapid deployment of drone capabilities, expand recruitment, and new emphasis on merit, performance, and operational excellence. Wouldn't that be an idea? Merit-based in Canada for once. And honor our veterans. They should also add in using drones to patrol the border. We can just get drones running on AI to patrol the border instead of hiring a Black Hawk helicopter costing us millions of dollars with a crew on it. Wouldn't that be something? And 4, digital sovereignty. Increase commercialization of Canadian developed technologies by 50% over the next decade. Require anyone who offshores taxpayer-subsidized intellectual property to repay the public contribution. Allow venture capitalists to roll over their gains tax-free into developing, commercializing, and deploying this technology in Canada. That's a great idea. This basically just reinvests it, gets spurs on the economy here more. And the 4th one here, ban foreign takeovers of sensitive intellectual property, data, weapons, and other vital tools of survival in modern crises. I think the 5th one should be cutting corporate income tax down to 5%, 3%. Let's do 3%. Federal's 9 and it's 2, 2.5 in most other provinces for provincial. And a side note here, as we see 9% net tax rate for corporations, 4.5% for manufacturers qualifying zero emissions technology. Jumping over to CTV, they bring in Brian Kingston from the automotive industry here, saying that Poilievre's plan here is, well, it's a winner.
The Conservatives will fight for a tariff-free auto pact with the United States, with shared protections against Chinese imports. In short, here's the deal. We should agree to keep Chinese vehicles out if Americans agree to let Canadian vehicles in. A full exemption to Buy America rules so that our companies can complete on construction projects, and a relaunch of the Keystone XL pipeline.
So Pierre Poilievre proposed a new auto pact in his address today. What are your thoughts about this proposal?
Well, I think it's bang on. It's exactly the type of proposal that we need to be making to the Americans. The auto industry is under extreme pressure right now because of Section 232 tariffs and because of the uncertainty around the future of our trade agreement. We've been making the case that if we want to strike a deal with the Americans, keeping China out has to be priority number one. We were on the right track. We had a tariff in place on Chinese EVs. And of course, that position has now been reversed by the government. And I think that's a mistake. And I think that's going to be a problem for us. So if we're going to get to the table with the US, if we're going to strike a tariff-free auto deal, keeping China out has got to be priority number one.
Okay, let's split that in.
This is so interesting because what Pierre Poilievre has done here is taken what Mark Carney has done and turned this into leverage against Donald Trump, where Carney couldn't do this himself. He can't just open up the market to China and then negotiate, well, I'll remove it if we open it up with you guys. It doesn't really work that way because he's the one who opened the market to China. But if Poilievre gets in, he can use that as leverage to help fix our auto industry.
To two parts about dealing with the US and dealing with Chinese EV vehicles. First, I want to ask you about the Americans here and how possible and realistic do you really think this is, what Pierre Poilievre is suggesting, looking at the fact that for President Trump, a good relation equals to a good trade deal, and that includes tariffs.
Yeah, there's no doubt that this is not going to be easy. However, I come back to the numbers, and a relationship between Canada and the US in auto is good for America. I believe there is a deal to be had because the Americans send more cars to Canada than any other market in the world. And in fact, they run a trade surplus with Canada in auto. So it is in the US interest to get to a point where we have duty-free access and return to an open North American automotive market. In addition, as the US is going to compete with China, you need North America. You can't fight China with one hand behind your back, and that's what's happening right now. So no doubt it will be difficult, but this is a good start, and I do think it's in the U.S. interest to work with Canada on this approach.
So we're already seeing prices going up in America because, well, the tariffs are increasing the prices. Got this video here coming out of the American government. I'm not sure where this is, but talking about the price of bananas going up now because of tariffs going on countries like Ecuador or Costa Rica that produce these bananas. And bananas have been the only food that has been stable over the past many decades. Even Canada here, the price of bananas is not really going up at all.
What's the tariff on bananas? Americans, by the way, love bananas. We buy billions of them a year. I love bananas. What's the tariff on bananas?
The tariff on bananas would be representative of the countries that produce them.
And what's that tariff?
Generally 10%.
Correct, 10%. Walmart has already increased the cost of bananas by 8%.
But as countries do deals with us, that will go to zero. As countries do deals with us, that will go to zero.
On the American consumer now and on the businesses with the confusion now. Mr. Secretary, I believe you know better. I believe you recognize that a trade deficit is not something to fear. I believe you know that predictability, stability is essential for businesses. I wish you would show that truth to this administration, and I yield back.
So this is interesting because they're both right here in that, well, the prices are going up on bananas now because, as she said, Walmart increased it 8% because of the 10% tariff. But I believe Donald Trump said he's increasing it to 15%. I don't know if that's put into the works yet. That would mean the bananas would be going up 15% unless Ecuador or Costa Rica or Panama or wherever they're buying these bananas from gets a deal with no tariffs. And that seems very unlikely. So it's really just the American public will have to pay more for bananas. And then the extra money goes to the government. It's a tax on the people, which is why it's so ridiculous that Carney put all these tariffs on food on us, which he later dropped. But I mean, he was increasing the cost of food in another way. We already had the carbon tax and then he got rid of that. Now we have clean fuel standard, which is just another carbon tax, the industrial carbon tax, food packaging taxes. And in America right now, their cars have gone up $10,000 since last year because of the tariffs. So this is a very risky strategy. You're essentially pissing off the public here if the products that they buy have gone up in value. Now, some of these companies are moving to America, which then would drop the price of those products. So some products are going to go down and probably a lot of stuff is going to go up.
There's no uncertainty. If you build in America and you produce your product in America, there will be no tariff.
We can't produce bananas in America.
Building in America and paying no tariff is very, very clear.
We cannot build bananas in America.
At large scale, no. Technically, maybe in Florida, you could grow some bananas there, but large scale, no. The varieties they're growing probably need more tropical temperatures. Bananas are already something that were almost wiped out. The main banana that people used to eat is called the Gros Michel. That variety of banana was pushed to near extinction, and then a new one came in called the Cavendish banana, which is what we eat today, and that one's under attack by a fungal disease called black stigatosa. So if they were to grow those bananas in southern Florida that has higher humidity and higher rainfall, they would have significant significantly higher amounts of black stigatosa, which is a airborne fungal disease which attacks the leaves, thus would wipe out the crops. So she has a valid argument here. So unless America was to grow rare varieties like red daca or rhino horn, monkey finger, blue java, one of those types that would work in the climate and has more natural resistance to black stigatosa or other fungal diseases, the prices of the bananas would go up because they wouldn't have as big yields. You can't grow bananas really in America, not on a commercial scale. Maybe they should be exempting all food. That would make more sense. But really, I'm not a fan of tariffs. I don't think it's a good strategy, but we're seeing it play out here as time goes on. Now, jumping back to Kingston here.
But the deal about China and Chinese vehicles coming in, Brian, we understand it's in very limited capacity. It's not like the gates have been completely open for Chinese EVs to come into the market. And they have a cap.
There is a cap, but experience will show how China does this. Yes, it's only 49,000 vehicles. That's about 3% of the market. It's 1/3 of EV sales in this country, so that's not insignificant. And make no mistake, once China has gained a foothold in this market, they will find ways to get more quota every single year. And if Canada doesn't provide that, they have leverage. They'll find ways to reduce our access for canola and other important exports that we were sending there. So we've opened the door, and this is a mistake. All you have to do is look at Europe. Europe has opened the market to China. 90,000 auto jobs lost in the past couple of years. So this is the path we're going down, and we still have time to reverse course and work with the Americans on the approach to China.
Speaking about
So him mentioning Europe there, what's happened is China sent in their EVs and their cheap cars, and you think, oh, great, now you can buy, instead of for $50,000, you can buy one for $20,000. But that's not what's happening. Say if there's an average vehicle that's $50,000, China's selling theirs for $40,000. So it's a little bit cheaper, but not a lot, but they're getting all the market share. It's dirty tactics, as Brian Kingston says here. This is a mistake. The door has been cracked open, and they will use leverage to get more and more access. Once they get that access, then they'll just ramp that up with their power, their economic strength, or other ways of coercion. I mean, we're talking about China here. So this is a massive mistake. We should be cutting out China. They want to buy stuff from us that they desperately need, then we should sell them that stuff. But we shouldn't be getting so closely tied with them.
Job losses, Brian. While, of course, Pierre Poilievre reiterated time and again his support for a strong domestic auto sector, we have seen even this government, the Prime Minister, just I think it was earlier this month, February, so much happens in a month, they announced like an auto policy of sorts with repealing of EV mandates, consumer incentives, infrastructure support, etc., etc. So how do you think what the Conservative leader is saying, approach is different from the Prime Minister? Because despite what he has said, we are also seeing job losses here. You mentioned job losses. We've seen them in Stellantis. We've seen them in GM. And we had to change course one way or another.
Well, you know, this is what I like about what the Conservative leader said, but it's also what the federal government is doing. We have to control what we can control. We ultimately don't guarantee the outcome of these trade discussions with the U.S., but we can make Canada more competitive. And the auto strategy was a good first step. We had an EV mandate that was hugely damaging and costly. That is gone. But there's more to do. I mean, in BC and in Quebec, they have their own electric vehicle sales mandates that sit on top of our existing emissions regulations. This is self-defeating policy that makes it costly to do business in this country and ultimately weakens our leverage when we go into negotiations with other countries because we're doing it with a weak domestic economy. So there is more that can be done. We need to get rid of internal trade barriers and make Canada the most competitive jurisdiction for manufacturing in the world. That will position us for success.
Brian King.
It's time to cut income tax down significantly, wipe out income tax completely of the first $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 of income, business tax down 5%. It's time to open Canada back up. Brian mentioned the regulations in BC. They have another one here. It's under their BC Zero Carbon Code that you can't have natural gas in a newly built home now. It's just not allowed. You can't have that. It's ridiculous. Like the incompetence from the federal government, Mark Carney, and David Eby, the provincial government here in British Columbia, is off the charts. Are they intentionally trying to destroy our country?